Hey, let's do a chair yoga sequence. You might want a yoga block or something that you can put as a little lift on the floor. Yeah, a cushion or a couple books stacked, if they'll feel like they're not going to slide around. And then today's class is meant to be pretty accessible, but with that in mind, definitely consult your doctor about these hip moves that we're going to do. Particularly if you've had a hip replacement, sometimes internal rotation is not appropriate after surgery, so you might want to skip some of these moves until you've been able to consult with your doctor. Okay, so with that said, we'll start in a comfortable seat. Your feet are maybe a little wider than hip distance and might even turn out just a bit. Okay, go lay down, Boone. And then we'll cat-cow the spine. So you'll start at your tailbone, curling your tailbone under, and then rounding, sending your gaze down towards the floor or towards your belly button. And then can you start from the tailbone? So really slide your tailbone back on the chair and start to come into a back bend through your lower back, your mid back, your upper back, and then your neck is up to you. You can stay with your eyes at eye level or look a little bit up if that feels good. Pulling your shoulder blades down your back, and then let's go 2 more times. So you're just rounding, sliding your tailbone underneath you, and looking down at the floor. And then sliding your tailbone back, so it becomes more like a wave-like pattern as we arch and round the spine. Let's go 1 more time, rolling the tailbone underneath and rounding. And then sliding the tailbone back to come up. Good. Okay, you can keep your feet like this or a little bit closer together, and then glue your hands to the sides wherever they land on your chair, and shrug your shoulders up towards your ears and take them wide down your back and then together. And do this a couple rounds. We're trying to keep the rib cage the same still, and just feeling how much can you move your shoulder blades on your back body, and also how gracefully can you do this. The head will want to kind of push forward and back to help exaggerate the movement. Let's switch directions. So taking them wide up your back, then squeezing them together and drawing them down. And again, we're just trying to keep the rib cage and the head pretty still as we move the shoulder blades. Good. And then let's take our arms into, I'll call this a cactus shape. And from here, you're going to keep your elbows roughly in line with your shoulders and point your fingertips forward and any amount down towards the floor, and then back up to the ceiling. And we'll go a couple times, up and down. This is humbling to do in front of the camera. There we go. And then we'll do opposite. So you can keep one hand up and the other hand down. And maybe you let your breastbone turn a little bit towards the lifted hand and then switch. So we allow there now to be a little bit of a rotational quality in the spine as we rotate in the shoulders, at the shoulder joint. So going just a couple times side to side. And the gaze might naturally follow, if that feels good. Good. Okay, and then we'll relax and melt the arms down. From here, you'll take your pinkies to the sides of your chair and then slide your pinkies up to your waist. You might have to adjust if your chair is in your way, but we're going to try to squeeze the elbows together and then straighten the elbows to reach your arms back, and then bend the elbows to bring the hands back together. So you can see here I'm trying to squeeze the elbows together and reach them back, and then bend the elbows and bring them forward. My chair's in the way now. And we'll go just a couple rounds as you're able. Again, trying not to push the head forward, keeping the head on tall, and just bending and straightening your elbows a couple times. This really lights up the upper back, so if you're feeling some warming sensation, then you are on point. Let's do one more. Good, okay, and then relax. And melt. I turned my heater up nice and high, my fire. I'll turn it down And then how does this feel in the shoulders? To take your hands and interlace them behind your head. And we'll bring the elbows together and then separate the elbows apart. And just going a couple times in and out. And then the next time you take your elbows out wide, straighten your elbows so the arms are at a high V. And now your palms are looking forward. Can you turn your palms to the floor and back behind you and reach out and back behind you? Let me scoot away from the wall. And then bend at the elbows. The hands might come to your hips or maybe behind your back. And then notice, did your rib cage push forward to try to do that? And just be really nice and tall and upright. And then straighten the elbows. So you're really far forward on your chair to make space for your arms. And sweep the arms up. Bend at the elbows. Can the hands come behind your head without touching your head? And then let the elbows come forward. And we'll go a couple rounds. These are called swimmer hovers. Go at your pace. So we're internally rotating to reach back as far as you can. And then bend at the elbows, trying to float your hands back behind you. Re-straightening and swimming the arms in external rotation overhead to that high V. And then hands behind you. Good. Okay, let's go one more time back. This is a really key place to try to keep reaching into and maintain that mobility there. Good. Yeah, it's so interesting. This reaching behind us, internal rotation and arms behind us, helps us actually create more space then to be able to take the arms up and overhead. It's all related, all talks to each other. Okay, let's do a little bit more with the spine. So we did our cat-cows. Now let's go a little bit side to side. So let's start with the arms just kind of dangling towards the floor, and take your right ear towards your right shoulder, and your right shoulder towards your rib cage, and your rib cage towards your waist, any amount that feels appropriate. And can you reverse out of this? So you're keeping your head in the side bend. It's the last thing to come back up. And then we'll go to the second side. So ear towards your left shoulder, and then side bending, your shoulder towards your rib cage, and your rib cage towards your waist. Any amount, and then we'll come back up. Good. Just double check here. Okay. And then you have the option of adding more strength to this. So if that already felt like enough, stick with that. If you'd like to add a little strengthening component, you can take your hands in front of your heart, a little resistance of your hands, side bend through your neck, and then shoulder to rib cage towards waist. And then from here you have the option of reaching your arms to frame your face. So we're reaching up and out. The arms are maybe a little forward of your head. And then bring your hands together. Can you keep the side bend through your neck and let your head be the last thing to come up? For me, that's a bit of a brain puzzle. And then side bending to the left, shoulder towards rib cage towards waist. Option to extend and reach the arms out to frame your face. Good. And then bringing the hands together and coming back up. Let's go one more time, side to side. As you're up for, side bending and extend the arms. You can be much higher than this, whatever is feeling appropriate for you. And then coming back up to center. One more time, side bending to the left, ear towards shoulder, shoulder towards rib cage towards waist. And extending the arms, bringing them back, and then coming back to center. Very nice. Okay, let's do a little bit of work with the hips. Okay, so from here, how about to have your block out of your way, and we'll take the left leg a little bit forward. Make sure you can see me. Left leg a little bit forward, and then lift it up. And set it down, and lift it up, and set it down. And then we'll do the right leg a little forward, and you lift it up, and set it down, and lift it up, and set it down. Good. Okay, let's go back to the first side, and see if you can lift it, and hover it off the floor. Use the chair to support you, and circle, and then circle back in the opposite direction. And then you can set the left foot down and slide it in. Extend the right leg till it hovers off the floor. And then again, circle and circle back in the other direction. Good. Okay, and then we'll release. From here, we need just a bit of height. And this is going to be really, specific to your body. So you'll see how this feels. You want your left knee to stay roughly in line with your hip joint, and then turn your left foot to the right and put it up on some sort of height. So my left knee's a little wider. I might slide my prop out a little bit, and that can be cumbersome. So just go slow and get your prop set up for yourself here. And then from here, we're going to try to stay really upright through your spine, really grow tall through the crown of your head, so that as you tip, you're tipping from your pelvis, like you were trying to lift your tailbone up off the chair. Like if you had a tail, tail feathers, you're lifting them up to the ceiling and then tipping back, okay? So I'm going to show from a different angle for a moment, just so you can see that I'm not doing this, I'm not rounding, but instead I'm trying to almost come into a back bend and swing my tailbone back to tip forward and come out. So we'll come in and out of this. You can make this a little more warming, lining up the muscles by almost trying to pull yourself forward, like your foot was getting lighter on the block, and then make your foot heavier on the block to push yourself away. And go really slow. Be curious about this movement of pulling yourself into it. And then really, can you make your foot heavy, heavy, heavy until you end up pushing out of this? So that we are lighting up the muscles, right? To pull ourselves into it is the front tissue at the front of your hip. And then to push out of it is the back pocket. So where you would have a pocket on your jeans. You feel a little bit of oomph, some life back there. Okay, and then we'll tip forward to any amount that feels appropriate to you and start to weight your heel and just pause here and see if you can lengthen your breastbone forward any amount more and dig your heel in, just a little bit of weight. So we feel some, this is a static hold, right? An isometric contraction of your back hip muscles. And then drive the heel heavy to sit and come all the way back up. Good. That might have been enough. If you're curious, you could see now from this upright position, would you be able to hover your foot off the block? My hip gets a little bit is sensitive in this position, so maybe you just see what feels appropriate for you. So I'm making the heel light. Maybe you can hover off for just a breath. So we're doing this isometric contraction now at the front of the hip, and maybe your foot just gets light on the block, you can see. Okay, and then melt the effort. And then it's really nice to just stay in this. We've externally rotated the thigh bone, and now just take a couple deep breaths. So you're just kind of resetting, rechecking in with your nervous system. And then we'll come and do the second side, okay? So I'm gonna turn to face you again. So you have that block out in front of you. Roughly, you're keeping your knee in line with your hip and then lifting the right foot, taking it towards your midline. So we've turned the thigh bone out at the hip joint. This is external rotation of your right thigh. The foot could be closer or further away from you, and your height of your block setup is whatever works for you and feels like a right amount of sensation, right? We don't want any sensation much at the knee. We want to be feeling this at the hip too, okay, just to make that clear. And then at first we just kind of rocked a little forward and back just to notice what your, kind of in a relaxed way, what is your range of motion here? And start to feel that we're trying to do this from the pelvis, right? So we're really isolating. We did a lot of movement of our spine, and now we're trying to isolate and do movement from the pelvis. So from here, we'll start to use a little more strength maybe coming into this. So you could imagine as you tip forward, you're pulling yourself forward like you're trying to stretch out past your right foot and really lift your tail feathers up. And then make your right heel heavy to push yourself out of this. So start to use a little more strength, go slower, be curious. And again, listen to your body if you need a little less or you need to take a break. Okay? Pulling yourself into it, going to a stopping point, and then pushing yourself out of this. Yeah, let's go one more time, tipping forward, and then stay there. I'm double checking my knees in line with my hip. It's okay for the knee not to be, but this is just an interesting place that we are intentionally working today. And then start to make the heel heavy without coming out for now. Make the heel heavy until you are clear what's going on. And then the heel gets so heavy it wins and pushes you out of it. That might be plenty. If you want to play with the hovering, you make your foot light now. And could you lift your foot off the block? This is hard. This involves hip flexors. If it's feeling grumpy, pinchy, skip it. Good. Okay. And then we'll melt the foot back to your prop. And again, take a couple of breaths just as a kind of check-in with your whole body, your whole nervous system. Okay. So this next one will work on internal rotation. This is the one where, potentially if you have had a hip replacement surgery, it's not appropriate for you. Okay, so make sure you know what's appropriate for your body. Also your knees, checking in with your knees this whole time. So we're to the front of the chair, and my chair is low enough for me that I'm going to keep my knee in line with my hip joint and toe heel my foot away from the midline now. So to come to internal rotation. So I'm going to toe heel this left foot to the left and keep my left knee roughly, right? If I didn't move my foot and just move my knee, it's okay. It's coming towards the midline. But for today, we're just working with the knee staying in line with the hip joint. I have no sensation in my knee, but I am feeling something interesting happening at the hip, okay? So if you're getting this at the knee, don't go so far. Go to a place that feels really subtle is best, okay? So just being here for a breath. Maybe this is kind of a new position that you don't find yourself in often, so it's good to just kind of do a check-in, assess, and then we're going to do those similar strengthening in this pose, okay? So you're going to see what muscles would help push your foot into the floor to slide it back to the right. So just start to make your left heel heavy. And I'm just even feeling like I just want to get more vertical. It helps me be taller. So this is strengthening, coming out of this position, kind of like it was strengthening to lift your foot off the block a moment ago. And then can you melt that effort and take a breath? Let go of some tension. And then you could see what would lift your foot higher off the floor. And for me, there's no way I'm lifting my foot, but I just am getting curious about how could I make my foot lighter? And then melt the effort. And then you could go one more time, pushing the foot into the floor. Take a breath. And then melt the effort and lift your foot off the floor, or imagine that happening. And then again, melt the effort, stay in the shape. Taking a breath. Good. Okay. And then you'll toe heel your foot and come back to center. Okay, let's do the second side. So you're keeping your right knee in line with your hip joint and toe heeling your right foot out to the right. And if you're noticing a real difference side to side, that's pretty common. We're really asymmetrical beings physically. We have a lot of asymmetries in our body that influences the hips, but also in life, right? So those habitual patterns or movements affect us. Imagine that. Okay, so your knee is in line with your hip joint. We've found a sense of calm and checking in, moving your foot less to the side if you're getting aggravation in the knee. And then start to wake up. What would push your right foot down into the floor and sweep your right foot back towards your midline? And just being kind of curious there. You're not going to don't make this hard. Just be curious about what would start to light that up, right? Just a small amount of your capabilities. And then you can melt that effort and see what would make your foot light. Like I especially, for me, imagine the heel lifting off the floor, and it's not. But what would happen, or what would make that happen? And then melt it, and go one more time, pushing your heel through the floor. Taking a breath while holding the strength, and then melt, and try to lift your foot off the floor. This one, I don't know, it feels like a joke almost, but we are just feeling what is the muscles that draw us deeper into internal rotation. Okay, melt the effort. And then we'll toe heel. And then from here, can you just like wiggle for me? Any sort of organic movement. Maybe you get your arms involved, or you like seaweed floating around in like a very calm little drift of the ocean here. The arms could go higher. The arms could be draping. But those are kind of intense. And then it can feel good to start to, your arms can play with this movement, but really it's the pelvis sliding on the chair, one sitting bone and then the other. And give our hips a little love. Good. Okay. From here, let's take the feet wide apart, maybe a little bit turned out, and then you have that optional block, maybe is handy still, to come into a forward fold. So we initiate the tip from the pelvis, but then can you kind of lift into your back body as you come forward, so that there's kind of like a hollowing through the back of your pelvis, and then maybe your hands come onto a prop. Maybe your elbows just rest on your thighs if this is can feel nice and supportive, and have a break for your wrist, and you're just coming as low as you are enjoying here. And we're just really intentionally filling the back body with breathing, with our breath. Good. And then you can walk your hands to your thighs, and we come up. All right. Thanks for practicing with me today.